Hello and welcome to Podcast Radio. And my special guest is Anthony Davis, who we've spoken to before, but it's good to see you again in Los Angeles. How are you?
I'm very well, Graham. It's really nice to be back in the same space. You've upgraded your space since
That's
we
right.
last spoke because you were behind a curtain, like
I was in the wardrobe.
you were in the wardrobe.
Yeah.
You'd followed the yellow brick road, and you were making everything work behind a curtain.
Yes, exactly.
Now you've upgraded. It looks fantastic.
Yeah, it's called Cube, K-U-B-E. Mob in Yorkshire sell them in Ripon in Yorkshire. And they came down and they fitted it all in the house and everything's great. And I've got a new microphone as well, thanks to you. This was your recommendation, the Electro Voice RE20. Thanks for putting me onto this.
Well,
I'm on the 320. Actually, I'm on the 320.
You're a 320, and this is the original RE20, which came out. I think they designed it in like 1959.
Yeah.
Stevie Wonder used it for his albums. I mean, it's the single greatest microphone ever made. And then about 15 years ago, they made a kind of Chinese, slightly cheaper one. They made it in China as opposed to America, and that's the RE320. And unfortunately for me, your one is actually better. The new Chinese copy is better than the original, in my view. So people can decide in the comments who sounds better.
Exactly. And there will be a lot of podcasters who watch this and who listen to podcast radio. Can we quickly talk about microphones for a minute? Because you are somewhat of an expert. How many do you own?
Oh, I have dozens, but I've been collecting them since I was a kid. Like my first pictures of me recording myself, probably with a little realistic microphone, which came from Tandy, or they call it Radio Shack in America, plugged into probably a Show recorder. Do you remember Show? It was Dixon's own brand.
Right.
And they made little tape decks. So that was how I started. And then I got an Audio-Technica Pro 22. That was my first mic. That was in blue. I still have that. And from there, I just love them. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the kind of phallic nature of them, but I genuinely feel like people take for granted how important this thing is. It's the difference between us as announcers sounding relaxed because we like what we hear in the headphones. You know, it complements our voice. But it also, you know, the pops and, I mean, I don't even have a shield. You got a shield on yours. I don't sound like I need a big foam. This microphone is so capable. So this is like my new happy place, microphone-wise. Electro Voice, American-made, designed pre-1960. I mean, and look at it. It doesn't even look like a microphone. It looks like some kind of Korean military device, you know?
Well, why do you think
Hope it doesn't kill me.
Why do you think so many podcasters use the mic I used to use, which was the Shure SM7B? The only reason I got that one, actually, was when I'd set up the studio when the pandemic hit, was because I was thinking back to radio stations I'd been on, and the last radio station I worked at in Australia, 2GO on the central coast of New South Wales, that was the mic we had in the studio. So that was why I got the SM7B. Why do you think so many people are using those? Because having listened to this now and to yours, they don't sound. They're too dark and muffled, really.
Well, they don't have character. They just don't have character like these mics. Two reasons. The reason everybody uses an SM7B, and I hate them. I remember having one set up. I did the Royal Variety performance for the BBC, and they'd set one up in the wings for me to use. And I did like one announcement on it, and I went, yeah. They switched it out. I think the reason is because Americans love their branding, American branding. Shure is an American company. It's a bit like why people are still flying on Boeing and buying Boeings, even though they keep crashing. It's like the brand is so powerful. And so Shure, you know, you can't go wrong with Shure. And that's true, you know, an SM58 is the classic singer's mic. So there's that. And then secondly, the fact that it's got the foam windshield built onto it, I think is the reason why people like it. I didn't think we were going to be talking about this today, but I'm very pleased that we are.
Okay. Well, I just thought, just to get us going, I'm with so many people who are watching this and listen to podcast radio into podcasts or on them. Well, then, before we finish talking about microphones, then, assuming that there are podcasters listening, I'd like you to give me, you gave me the recommendation for this one. I'd like you to give me 3 recommendations. First, for a beginner on a budget. Second, for a mid-range intermediate. And third, for the money no object microphone. Where would you go?
Well, let's put this at the top, because this is the RE20. That's like, I'd say top of the range.
You wouldn't
Thank
go
you
for
very
a
much.
condenser mic?
Am I allowed to? No, I mean, I've got a beautiful condenser mic here, which is an NT1, a Rode NT1, not the NT1A, the silver one, the black one made in Australia.
Yeah.
It's all about the detail. That's what I use for voiceover work, is the Rode NT1. It's very clean. The Neumann U87 is considered to be at the very, the best mic you can get, but it's like $2,000.
Yeah.
So this $400, your one $300, £250 thereabouts, RE320 in the middle. The cheapest kind of best podcaster mic, AKG make a mic that looks like an old-fashioned mic. You can get it for about £100,
Right.
maybe £120. But I always buy from the Amazon warehouse, which is like box damage stock.
Yeah.
I never buy new from Amazon. I always scroll down a bit and it says used from. And then I looked the other day because a friend of mine's trying to get one. I shouldn't say this now because it'll be out of stock and she won't be able to get it. But AKG make one that's got 4 capsules in it, 2 on the front, 2 on the back. It's a square mic. I forget what it's called, but AKG only make like one mic that looks like this. And it's a USB mic, and it has a headphone socket, it has a mix button, and it has a gain button, but it also has 2 capsules on the back. So you and I could sit across a table and we could be interviewing each other for a podcast or just doing a podcast, and there's effectively a mic on each side of this microphone.
Yeah.
So AKG make it, and it's a lovely little microphone.
Yeah.
Little, it's about this big, but it looks like an old-fashioned mic, and the
Yeah.
quality is fantastic. So that's what I'd start with, and it's not expensive.
Okay, so the condenser mic wouldn't be on there even though because I've got a thing about condenser mics. When I was in Australia, every radio station I worked in, it was dynamic mics. In the UK, every station I've worked in has been a condenser mic. And I think condenser mics, in many ways, superior to dynamic mics, or most of them. But I find that in a radio studio where people may be coming in and out of the door while the mic is open, where you are self-opping and pushing buttons and clicking a mouse, I just find condenser mics are too sensitive, and I wonder why the Brits have them in radio studios. It's like you've given a mic that's too good for a radio
because it goes
studio.
back to branding, Graham. In England we would buy British, and so invariably the mics in early studios were British made, and they were condenser mics. Dynamic mics, ribbon mics originally. The British mics were ribbon mics, and then the follow-on from a ribbon mic is a condenser mic. Then you get to a dynamic mic.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. These are great for radio because they're not sensitive. You really need to talk into them to get them to kind of do good work for you. Whereas, I mean, you and I are both in very well soundproofed rooms, so we could use a condenser mic, but it's too sensitive. I use them for voiceover because if I'm working with, say, studios, Disney or Universal, they want you to use condenser mics.
Yeah.
But for things like this, you and I with this, and for 5-minute news, I was using a condenser. I've now switched back to this because I just think it sounds so nice on a news broadcast, because this is like a newscaster's microphone on radio.
Yeah.
So I just looked up the AKG name.
Yeah.
It's called the Pro Audio Lyra Ultra HD 4-capsule multi-capture mode USB-C condenser microphone for recording and streaming. It's $140 in the US, but on the warehouse.
So that's £100 in the UK. Yeah.
£100, and it's a lovely looking mic on a big stand, and that's what I recommend. It's just a very interesting microphone. Looks like this.
There you go.
Okay.
And how is life in Los Angeles?
It's pretty good here. I mean, I think we measure life by how locked down you are and how many deaths there've been in local hospitals due to COVID now. That's tragically, that's how, if a country is doing well, it's not so much economically anymore. It's more about, who's succumbed to the Miley Cyrus. So I feel like Los Angeles is good. People are very, back into it. It's a big economy here, 5th richest economy in the world, ahead of the United Kingdom. So, there's just a lot of industry here. People are very industrious. And so, I mean, I don't really feel it because I never really went out in the first place. I think we discussed this last time. People like us, we're homies. And that's why we're good in radio studios, because I don't crave going out and, leaning at a bar with a martini. I'd rather be in here with, you. If your name was Martini, that would be even better for this joke to work.
Perfect. Yeah.
So, I think California's doing good. I mean, I was saying this to someone the other day. We don't have seasons like in England. I mean, in England, we used to have proper seasons, and climate change has shifted that as well. So it doesn't snow in the winter. You might get like 3 days of snow randomly in February. You're like, what's happening here? Here, there's no seasons. I mean, it is literally like all the same. And so time does go much faster on the West Coast, because you don't have any point of reference through the year. So my daughter is about to be 6 next week. And I'm like, I brought her to America when she was 1. And I can't believe it. I mean, I'm just like, where did all that time go? And she has an American accent now as well. So,
Why did you move to Los Angeles?
Brexit.
Really?
Well, that was like quite high up on the list. I was very demoralized by that because I knew it was going to be a disaster. And I hate to say told you so, but you got any gas in your car today? I mean, that is a direct effect of Brexit. There is no petrol because there's no HGV drivers coming from Europe to be able to drive the gas to the. And so the military, I hear, are in today.
They're in today in London and the southeast locally, yeah.
Right. This is, and when all of the Brexiteers were like, 2 weeks after Brexit, 2 months after Brexit, 6 months after Brexit, there you go, see, no difference, everything's the same. And it's like, it actually takes like 6 to 9 months for an economy to catch up because, especially with things like food and services and produce, because stuff sits in warehouses and oil sits in barrels and petrol sits in whatever petrol sits in.
Tanks. Yeah.
Tanks. Thank you. And so it takes 6 to 9 months for the economy to kind of see the effect of a major change of an economic shift. And Brexit is a huge shift. And I mean, I can talk about Brexit for hours. Like I will just keep talking about it if you want to, because it's so fundamentally important. And the problem is when you talk to Brexiteers, they don't want to talk about it. They didn't want to talk about it during the referendum. They didn't want to talk about it after the referendum. They're like, because it's born of anger and
racism.
That's what the vote is. It's just people who are dispossessed and it's not their fault. It's because of the economy. Wages haven't gone up in 35 years. So when the cost of living goes up, I should do it this way for you, for the graph.
Yes,
goes up.
Yeah.
The cost of living goes up. And as you know, I mean, the price of a house, it used to be, you could buy a house for like 65 grand 25, 30 years ago. And now a house is like £500,000. And so wages didn't go up like that. And since I was a kid, everyone was earning 25 grand a year. That's how much people earn. In London, it's a little more, 32,000. But in the north or the Midlands, you're in, just by the M25, it's like 25 grand a year still. This is why people were angry.
Yeah.
People can't live like that. It's poverty. And so when I talk to people here in the 5th richest economy in the world, and I explain that most people in England live in relative poverty and they've got used to it and they make it work for themselves, they just don't understand what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
The economies are so different. And I love England and I will always be British first and very proud to be British. But wages need to rise. And, they talk about the living wage, the London living wage. What's that capped at? 15, I think.
Is it? Is that all it is?
No, maybe it was 10. Maybe it's 10. $15 is the living US living wage.
Right.
No, maybe it's more than 10. Anyway, it should be 25. It should be £25 an hour in London, minimum wage.
Yeah.
£8, like, what are you talking about? So that's the problem. And that's why I can talk endlessly about Brexit, because I see that these two are intrinsically linked. People are angry. They don't know what to do. They don't like politicians. Someone gives them an option to blame immigrants or blame Europe.
Yeah.
I mean, we had members of the European Parliament. We had a democratic say in Europe the whole time. We could have changed anything, but no one ever cared who their MEP was when it came to a vote.
And so that's how UKIP got in. So we had UKIP representing a lot of constituencies in Europe, and UKIP were anti-Europe. It's like having an anti-democracy party in Westminster.
And we're very eloquent, because Nigel Farage, or Farage, as James O'Brien calls him, he's a very charismatic leader. And, I think he's amazing. I don't like his politics, but as a guy, I find him very watchable.
He's a very good presenter. Yeah.
I hate that. But, and Daniel Hannan, who was also a member of the European Parliament, a conservative, is the most incredible orator. If you search Daniel Hannan's speeches from when he was an MEP, they are some of the greatest speeches I ever heard. But their politics is so terrible. It's like you can't have... The EU was created to kind of protect us after World War II, so that we didn't fight with these countries anymore. Why would you want to leave that?
Yeah.
Let alone petrol coming from Europe. I mean, England doesn't
especially
create anything. We have to import. We don't have industry.
When you see when Europe got it together, when we worked together with Britain, and I know you're an aviation fan, but if you look at Concorde and the success of Airbus, who now take on Boeing and beat them, that was us getting together and taking the best bits of instead. There was British aviation. There was Vickers and Bristol and Avro and all them, but not one of them took on the Americans head on until Airbus, when we got together with our European partners.
Because it was a conglomerate. It brought together these. And what's going to happen to Airbus now because of Brexit?
Yeah.
They were making wings and landing gear in the UK. That was our contribution to Airbus, was wings and landing gear.
Yeah.
And the A380 program, which, they made parts for, has now been shut down because of the pandemic.
Yeah.
And we don't need super large jumbos anymore. And, I mean, it's just a tragedy. I mean, isn't it sad that Airbus are only doing well now against Boeing because Boeing have all these problems with the 787 and then the 737 Max.
Yeah, yeah.
And fatalities, and 346 people died in 2 737 crashes.
Yeah.
And they still wouldn't ground the plane.
Yeah. Yeah.
They did ground it eventually, but now it's flying again.
So as far as you were concerned, things were so bad in Britain that you would rather at the time live in Trump's America.
It wasn't Trump's America.
It wasn't when you got there? I'm getting the timeline wrong.
2 weeks.
Oh, it was Obama's America you went to, and then Trump happened to you. You escaped one thing at this end, and then now on the other side.
When I was planning the move, it was always Obama's America, and then in my head it was going to be Hillary Clinton's America.
Right.
Because do you remember, we were also convinced that Clinton was a surefire win.
Yeah.
We didn't think that Trump would get in. He was like a comedy entrant.
Yeah.
He didn't think he was going to win.
No.
That look on his face coming down the escalator.
That first
he
meeting.
He was still in a reality TV show. It's like, what am I supposed to be doing here? Someone give me some direction.
That first awkward meeting when him and Obama sat down after he'd been voted in, you thought, like, he doesn't want to be there.
No, he didn't. He never wanted to do it.
No.
He was going to set up a TV channel.
That's right.
He was going to use it as collateral, as free promotion for a TV station called Trump TV, I guess. In the basement of Mar-a-Lago, so he would never have to go anywhere. He could just play golf and do a bit of television and get subscriptions and ratings and, just criticize Clinton. I think that's what he was planning. It's probably still going to happen.
It's all worked out for you, though, in the US. So you've got some Emmy news for us, haven't you?
Well, I didn't personally win an Emmy, but
I'm saying you did.
Voice.
You are the closest I've ever had to an Emmy Award winner on the show. So I'm gonna count that. That's
very sweet of you. I lent my voice to a Nike commercial, which turned out to be the biggest ad they've made in a long time. It was called "You Can't Stop Us," and it was a 90-second, extended. And you may have seen it has a split screen where it's just editing, where they've just edited sports people doing the same moves but 2 different sports, and the line down the center of the screen separates it. And it's one of the most beautiful commercials I've ever seen, because it's humanity and it's people coming together, and you can't stop us, you can't stop sport is the payoff. And so my voice is in the ad, and it won the Grand Prix at Cannes for Best Commercial. And then last week it won the Emmy for Best Commercial at the Emmy Awards. And we did it in August last year. So a year later it won the 2021 award, even though it came out in 2020. So it's had like an extended life. And it really is such a wonderful ad. So yeah, for the team, you know, to see the team get up at the Emmys and win, I was very proud of them, and it's such a great thing to be involved in. I'm only in it for, you know, a little bit, but it's a really good commercial. So I didn't book many ads last year, but the one I did happened to be the biggest ad of the decade.
Well, 5 Minute News, the podcast's also won an award, hasn't it? Oh, actually, it's been nominated for. It's been it won. What did it won? One and
it was nominated for a Podcast People's Choice Award, and it won a Communicator Award, which is out of New York City, and that I didn't realize what a big the Communicator Awards. I didn't realize what a big deal that was, but in the audio business, loads of people I really respected won awards and were up for awards, and we did an episode about the atrocities in Yemen. And that was the episode that won under the news category. And so I was very proud of that because, you know, 5 Minute News has been going since July 2019, but it's still like the new kid on the block. And there are like small news channels and news networks that are appearing because the mainstream news networks, the legacy, I hate to use the word mainstream news because that has really been harnessed by the right and used as collateral, you know, it's like leveraged. What are they? I only worked out recently that they abbreviate it, so on social media they call it MSN. And I thought that was Microsoft Network, and it's mainstream news, and they
okay. So it's not the same as MSNBC, I see. So yeah.
No.
Right, okay.
Very critical of mainstream news. And mainstream news has never changed. I mean, yeah, sometimes it's a bit annoying. But in the main, it's still reputable. Yeah. And so because of what happened with the rise of misinformation with the 2020 election and even Brexit and anything else, any other democracy in the Western world, unfortunately, mainstream news has took a bit of a downturn. And in fact, after Trump left, most news channels lost 35% of their viewers.
Yeah.
Because there wasn't this scandal every day. So it's very interesting what's changed. So 5 Minute News has filled a little bit of a gap in the market.
And is that gap a demand for nonpartisan news, do you think?
Yeah, I think people are craving just the truth, and they also don't have much time. 5 Minute News does what it says on the tin. You're going to get the 3 biggest stories in the world. Actually, that's not true. The 3 most important stories in the world, not the biggest stories, because the biggest stories could be, you know, just awful. As in, like, rubbish, you know. I mean, look, Britney Spears separating the conservatoire from her father was like the biggest story here 2 days ago.
Yeah, and
of course, 5 Minute News.
Brexit, of course, as well, and all that.
Yeah,
Harry and Meghan. Yeah.
5 Minute News doesn't do those stories. 5 Minute News only does stories that affect dozens, thousands, millions of people. It has to be a story that you are going to be affected by. Not one person is affected, not someone else's personal business, not a celebrity story. It has to be something that affects a large group of people. So that's why we focus on social injustice and inequality and health, which was useful when the pandemic started. Just 3 or 4 months after 5 Minute News launched, the pandemic really was what caused 5 Minute News to take off because we were focusing on health. And then, of course, the climate crisis, which was announced around the same time, as in the hashtag climate crisis. And, of course, we do a lot of climate coverage. So the timing of it was very useful. And also people don't have much time anymore because everyone's working multiple jobs and has so many streams. And it's like, where do I get my news? So the listeners that we have, the viewers we have on YouTube, they write to us and they say, you've saved me so much time because I just do 5 Minute News in the morning and then I'm done for the day. I don't have to spend my whole day like scrolling on websites trying to find little bits of truth.
So when you're deciding which stories to cover, surely they must be filtered through your background because you grew up in London. And right now in London, one of the things that's happening is the Insulate Britain mob are closing the M25. Today they closed the Blackwall Tunnel. Would you cover something like that? Because it would be of interest to you because it's about your hometown. But do you think it's got a global appeal, a story like that?
Yeah, I would. What I would do is I would amalgamate a few stories. So the story would be about the shortage of petrol.
Right.
And then you would probably get the protest at the same time. I mean, I saw on Good Morning Britain that Susanna Reid interviewed one of the protest organizers for that, and her angle for the whole protest was, but you're shutting down the M25. Like, do you not care about people getting to work? And I was like, why would you say that? Like, that is the mainstream media denying the existence of climate change, worrying more about people getting to work than the effect of this protest, because the effect of the protest got that guy on Good Morning Britain. Yeah. She didn't see the irony of it. Like, she's like, why did you do this? Is it going to have any effect? What do you expect to come from this? And I'm thinking, he's on your show.
It has to be said, though, he didn't exactly cover himself in glory, did he?
No, he walked off.
Yeah, it was a tough room because Richard Madeley gave him a hard time as well.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. So I feel like I wish journalists would see the bigger picture, and 5 Minute News just does the bigger picture. The planet is burning. California, I mean, how long are you going to live in California? Another 20 years? The wildfires and the extreme heat, how are you going to live here? We're going to end up using more air conditioning to live in hot climates like this. Air conditioning puts out gas. So all of the savings we're going to make in our carbon footprint will be eradicated by more air conditioning, which will put more gas into the atmosphere. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. I mean, we're done. I mean, I've never known it this bad.
Do you cover anti-vaxxers?
No, because it's not true. I mean, it's like, why give credence to stuff that's not true? The whole point of 5 Minute News is it's got to be true.
Right.
So if you say to me, as plenty of anti-vaxxers have, I'm not taking the vaccine.
I'm not an anti-vaxxer, by the way. Not even.
No, but I'm not saying you. You're my foil just for the purposes of this conversation.
Okay.
But the main argument of the anti-vaxxer is it's not been tested.
Right.
And that's just not true.
Yeah.
So it's like, how do you get started with this? It's tested just as much as any other vaccine. It just had emergency authorization to get it to market faster. It had the same testing. It had the same trials. It had the same, and it has like Moderna, which I have, has got 95% efficacy against Delta.
Yeah.
It's not like it doesn't work.
Yeah.
So they'll put fillers in their lips and they'll put like saline in their breasts, but they won't put a tested vaccine in their arm to stop them from dying. It doesn't make sense to me.
What I would like to ask them, and I don't see journalists asking this, is like, okay. Because as far as I can see, the only way out of this pandemic is vaccination, mass vaccination.
Yeah, it's the only way out.
It's the only way out. So no one asks an anti-vaxxer, so you've got a better idea? What's your idea of getting out of this? And if they haven't got an idea, well, then they need to just pull their head in, to use an Australian expression. Because brilliant. If you've got another answer to this, but if your answer is more lockdowns and, more economies being crashed through this, well, then I'm sorry, I can't get on board with that. I really don't understand why the anti-vaxxers are not. It's like these people who go, I don't want one of those big wind turbines near my house. Oh, really? What do you want? A coal-fired power station? You'd like that instead, would you? How about a nuclear power station? Because we've got to generate energy.
There's no rationale because there's no intellect. And I had to mop my brow just then because we turned off the air conditioning in here because it was too noisy, and now I'm schwitzing.
It's not necessarily too. You could try it if you like. It's not.
No,
too
I don't
noisy.
want to put it on.
Okay.
We're professionals. We can't have air conditioning.
Okay.
We've got to.
You're suffering for your
art. I
art.
used to be so impressed with Barry Manilow on stage. He never had a drink of water. The guy's like 76, and he did like 3 hours, and he never had a glass of water. And I was like, that's the guy I want to be.
Right. Okay. All right. What do you miss most about Britain?
Aeroplanes overhead.
You don't get them in LA?
No, because they fly in over the sea here. And
okay. That's right, because LAX is right on the coast, isn't it? At Long Beach.
Yeah, it's right on the coast. And then they do kind of go downtown, but they're still too high up. Whereas when I lived in Victoria, in London, they were like 2,000 feet above me going into Heathrow. And so I got to see these giant A380s and 777s, and it was like or the A350-1000, which is my new favorite.
Yeah. Why is that
But
your
I don't
new
get to see
favorite?
those. Because it's going to save the world. That's why. Because it's got a very good record on emissions, but more importantly, it's made by a European manufacturer. It's an Airbus, and it's the one that's going to. It's basically the Dreamliner killer. Boeing made the Dreamliner, and Airbus made the A350, and the 1000 is the stretched one. And so, if you fly on Virgin Atlantic between London and Los Angeles, you're guaranteed to get an A350-1000, and it's a lovely aeroplane.
Right. Okay. Because I haven't flown on that or the Dreamliner. I've flown on the A380, and I have to say I only had one experience of it, and I flew from Auckland to Singapore, and then I got a different A380 Singapore to London, and I have to say, on board it wasn't that much different to being on a 747, but the thing that took ages was getting your bags at the end, because instead of like nearly 400 people waiting for their bags, there was nearly 600 people waiting for their bags. So this push for smaller aircraft and more flights might be the way to go for me.
I mean, that's the way it's going now. And sadly, that's the reason why the A380 program has died.
Yeah. So how is Boris viewed in America then?
I don't think they think about him very much. I mean, obviously he's on the TV every day in England, but I just feel like Boris is a bit of a joke character, like a comedy character. They can't take him seriously. People are very groomed on American television. Have you noticed that? I mean, I when I watch the news here and any interviews, people are very well groomed. They have beautiful teeth, and they're very. And then you switch back to British TV, and newscasters, they're not making much effort. They haven't had their teeth straightened or whitened. They wear whatever is the first thing they reach for at 4:00 in the morning off the clothes rack. And Boris is like an extension of that. He, in terms of like brand Britain, it's very like Austin Powers, How's he so sexy with such terrible teeth?
Austin Powers meets Benny Hill, isn't it, really?
Yeah. So I like that side because I love the eccentricity of the British, and I love the fact that we don't care how bad our teeth are. You and I have nice teeth, so it's not an issue. But I mean, and the fact that he keeps like making children just adds credence to the fact that it's like.
But he won't tell us how many he's got. That's still a mystery.
It's somewhere between 20 and 30.
And what shape is the special relationship in then? Because it's been under a little bit of pressure, especially after the Afghanistan debacle, hasn't it?
Well, there isn't a special relationship. There never has been. I mean, this is the thing. It's like that phrase was invented by Churchill, and it was mentioned, I think, in a radio broadcast, and then it was repeated by Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan because they were very close, as you know. She loved all his movies. And it hasn't really reared its head in America since. It's a British thing. It's something that we in England hold on to, this special relationship, and it doesn't mean anything. It's not a phrase they use here.
Right.
It's something we are hanging on to, and it's the reason why Brexit happened with no trade deals in place, because they're like, don't worry, America will see us good because we've got the special relationship. And it's like, no, you haven't. Especially with Biden. He's furious about Ireland because, of course, he's from Ballina, this little, Southern Irish town, and he's furious about the fact that they didn't do the kind of a proper deal, and the island's going to be left behind, and so he doesn't want to do a deal with Boris because he thinks Boris is Brexit. He actually probably thinks Boris's first name is Brexit Johnson.
Yeah.
So he's not prepared to do give any special treatment like Trump was going to. So that's a disaster. And if you saw the press conference the other day with Boris Johnson sitting gurning in the Oval Office, looking like a Chad with his nose over a wall. Biden just sat there. They were both masked, so you couldn't hear anything Boris was saying, which was probably a good thing. They should have used that thing that Hannibal Lecter had, just for international relations, just keep him quiet. Just let him sit there. But it was a disaster. It was so embarrassing. Biden obviously was not playing ball. He was just like, I'm having nothing to do with this ridiculous guy. Can't even iron the corners of his shirt. The collars are fraying inwards.
Can't even comb his hair. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
he tousles his hair before an interview. So it's
'Cause
probably
that's his
combed all the
brand.
time that he's not on television.
Yeah. Well,
So, I mean, I tweeted this morning a prediction, and I've never been wrong. But Rishi Sunak is going to become the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, the next Conservative Prime Minister.
do you think
That's what's going to happen.
he's got the gravitas for the big job?
No,
Okay.
I didn't say any of that.
Okay.
I just said that he's going to become the next Prime Minister.
He's just made a speech, like, I think within the last few hours, today anyway, at the Conservative Party conference. And
He made a joke about how short he was, which is
Did he? I
always
didn't see
nice
that
to
bit.
start
Really?
to be self-deprecating. Yeah.
He was kind of skirting around the issue of tax rises. And it made me wonder, like, we've had nearly 2 years of the economy barely getting by because of the pandemic. Who are you kidding that we're not going to get tax rises? We've got to pay for this thing now. It's going to take years. And it just seemed interesting that he wouldn't just go, look, we're going to have to pay for this. I can't see why politicians always try to sit on the fence and hedge their bets and all the rest of it. They seem to, they must think that we don't understand. I don't know. We know
Because
that there's no money.
we don't understand. I think that's what it is. There's this apathy.
Nobody wants a tax rise, but it's got to come. We have to pay more tax to pay for this. We have to. There's no choice. It's like after the Second World War. We had to pay for that. And that's why you had, massive austerity in the 50s in America were a boom time. But in Britain, from what I've heard, they were still rationing for a lot of it. It was pretty dire.
The thing is, you only need to tax the rich. You don't need to regular people. In fact, anybody who is earning less than, 30, 40, 50,000 pounds a year shouldn't be paying any tax at all. There's enough tax up the other end. I mean, Biden's huge infrastructure deal, which is not going to go through, by the way. It's just not going to happen. But he's not going to tax anybody who earns less than $450,000 a year. So all the people that are complaining they don't want a tax rise, it's not going to affect them.
Yeah.
People are so partisan, they're just here, especially they're like, even if Trump came out and made really positive announcements, you'd still have Democrats moaning and the right celebrating. It's just like football teams. It's really, it's so ingrained. And I feel like people have always been light on detail in these conversations. Very keen to start celebrating or criticizing or demonstrating. But in terms of detail, like, what are we talking about here? Have you read the policy? Have you read the paper? Have you written to your MP? No. But I'm furious.
Because it's what the other side want. Yeah. I don't support them. Yeah. We get a bit of that here, but I do think it is a bit more extreme there, particularly now. And I don't think Joe Biden did himself any favors with the way that America came out of Afghanistan. I'm guessing a few people who are on the fence would have gone the other way. Could things like that, if he messes up again with something big like that, because to be fair, it did happen quite early in his presidency. So by the time there's an election, a lot of people will have forgotten about that. But do you think there's a chance Trump could return?
Yes, I do. I mean, I think the only reason he would want to return is to escape prosecution for various crimes. Because that's the only way he's going to get away with it, is if he has presidential protection.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes me really sad just thinking about that. But yeah, of course it could happen.
Yeah.
And, he hasn't really gone away, because the rise in hate crime, the misinformation, obviously with the vaccine and everything, this is all Trump's brigade.
Yeah.
And so he might be, relaxing in Mar-a-Lago, but his machine, that huge machine that is partly, Fox News and then Newsmax and OAN and all these other newer channels that are just peddling, and Breitbart, and I mean, they're all contributing to this very dark period in our history, and it hasn't gone away. It's in fact I'd say it's worse now than it was when Trump was around. He was like a kind of puppet master distractor because it's like comedy TV. But now it's in the shadows. And it's very sad because it doesn't benefit anybody other than the very wealthy.
Yeah.
Again, it's the same story, isn't it? All the people that supported him have not benefited from his tenure. He didn't do anything to help regular people.
And you think with that going on and with the media being very partisan, you've got Fox on one side and CNN kind of on the other side.
Is our connection particularly bad now?
It was briefly. It seems okay now. I don't know what it was, but it seems clearer now. Am I coming through clearer at your end? Oh no, you've gone silent now.
Okay.
Oh, you're back.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened because you've upgraded your internet, haven't you? So it can't be you.
I can hear you, but I can't really see it.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I can see you, and you're going a little bit Norman Collier at times.
Nice to be back. Which I thought would be better, but I think it might be the problem.
What could be the problem?
Only you and I would get that reference.
Oh, Norman Collier.
Sure of it. Yeah, Norman Collier. Yeah, it's us. That reference is for people that don't know. Norman Collier used to do a comedy act with a microphone where he would cut in and out, but he would do it with his voice rather than the microphone. It was very funny in the 70s.
Yeah, he'd say, "There's something wrong with the phone." Yeah, there was always something wrong with this microphone. Yeah. So I'm just thinking with 5-minute news being nonpartisan and with people kind of taking sides and going to their team for their information, can 5-minute news cut through?
Yeah, I mean, I think I said to you last time, and I stick by it, you can't change the world, but you can do a little bit, just do your little bit. And I feel like that's what we're doing. People will find 5-minute news. I mean, it's getting a bigger and bigger audience on YouTube now, which is interesting because there's no pictures. It's just a graphic.
Yeah.
And yet, it's almost like we've created a new genre because people are so sick of seeing like a perfectly painted newscaster, either a blonde female or a man with a beautiful head of hair, either lying to them or giving them a partisan perspective. And so what 5-minute news does is it strips everything right back. So you're not even getting a person in vision if you're watching it on YouTube. You're just getting an audio waveform and the graphics. And you have to listen. You have to use your ears, and you have to listen to a very calm voice telling you the truth. It's not hyped, it's not spun. You should be able to listen to it before you drift off to sleep. So I think it's creating a new genre in news that didn't exist, and that is back to basics. It's like radio was before radio became visualized.
Yeah.
It's very clean, and I'm very proud of it. And it's still something I relish making an episode every day, and we're up to 680 episodes now. And you can listen every day on any streaming platform and subscribe on your podcast app or hear it on podcast radio, of course, a few times a day.
Yeah.
It's just, if you've got a life, spend time with your kids, spend time with your family, spend time doing your job. Don't spend time scrolling through Instagram for news or Facebook for news or Twitter for news. Just get your news from somewhere that you trust is going to keep you informed. We don't need to know everything. The 3 most important stories of the day around the world, focused on America. I think 5-minute news it's my baby. I feel very proud of it.
Where does it fall into? Because of all the things you do, I mean, you are a broadcaster, journalist, actor, writer, comedian, and one of the world's top voice talents. Where does 5-minute news rank in all the things you do? What number would it be, with number 1 being at the top? In level of importance, not necessarily in what brings in the most the most money for you, but in level of importance of the work you do, where would it rank?
Well, it's certainly at the top for me because, I haven't done comedy since before the pandemic. I did a little bit of stand-up in LA just to kind of get to know the culture because I like to, assimilate as much as possible. So I've not done that for a couple of years. So, comedy's not really happening for me anymore, as is the case for a lot of comics. And because, in England, they call you a jack of all trades if you do more than one thing,
More than
whereas in
one thing.
America, they call you multi-talented. So it's rather wonderful that I can kind of be all those things here and no one bats an eyelid, and I've been in meetings. I remember being in a meeting at Universal and they said, "Oh, and do you dance?" And I was like, "Yeah." And they were like, "Okay, good." I was just thinking, it's so wonderful. Like you're asking a journalist if he dances, and it's a completely straight question. There's nothing, no hidden meaning. They're just like, good, okay, fine, thank you. Tap dance, yeah. I'm actually taking new tap class lessons at the moment as well. I've been tapping my whole life. I love it, so tap dancing is pretty high on the list. But 5-minute news is, of course, it's at the top because it's so important, and I do it every day, and it's my passion project. So. I make my living from being a voiceover. I'm not really doing much acting, a little voice acting, but not on camera with this. And 5-minute news is the thing that I care the most about because it's important. We're still living in a period where we need something to counteract misinformation. And I personally think that voting rights is the most important thing in England and in America. I don't think the infrastructure bill that Biden's trying to put through is the thing he should be putting through first. It should be the voting rights bill. That's way more important because without it, you don't have a democracy. And democracy is already fallen in America on January 6th. That was a coup. It was plain and simple. It's on video. And that's going to happen in more and more countries. And you see, Bolsonaro in Brazil, you see people taking on the characteristics of Trump. And that's why I'm saying Trumpism hasn't died. He's now cast a net to leaders around the world to say it's okay to behave like this. And that will be the legacy, tragically. So I think voting rights, gerrymandering, which is a huge thing here, which they're, boundary lines, redrawing maps. There's so many things, new Republican legislation to prevent Black people from voting in the South because they changed the times that you can vote. Most people have got like shift work, so they're not free to vote when they want you to vote. And whereas in England, we all do postal voting. Postal voting is normal. For some reason in America, the right have branded postal voting as fraudulent. Right. So this is what we're dealing with now, Graham. It's far more important than anything.
Well, 5-minute news is available, as you said, on podcast radio, on DAB in the UK and online. And 5-minute news as a on-demand news service is wherever you get your podcasts and on-demand and streaming stuff. What is next for Anthony Davis?
That's a good question. I have a little show that I'm working on, which hopefully will be coming soon. It's going to be a 2-hour show, probably in this studio. So I'm going to have to get the air conditioning fixed. Where I'll do a daily kind of interactive show. So that's something that I'll be announcing in a few weeks. Because, people have said, we listen to 5-minute news, but where do we hear you like being you, like having an opinion? But as I said to you, my opinion to me seems less valuable now than it has been before because we're sick of opinion. Just give us the facts. So for me, like one less white guy having an opinion is probably better than, how it has been with people doing talking heads, which is why I stopped going on the news and giving my opinion. I just felt like it's not what we need right now. Just the facts, ma'am, as they say. On Dragnet, I think that might have been a reference to. So, in answer to your question, what's next is I love voice acting. I spend most of my time in here, recording like you do in your booth. This is what we do for a living. So whether it's doing the news or whether it's doing characters or commercials, I love it all. And this goes back to the microphone and our relationship as announcers with this device here. That inside there's like a little coil that's vibrating as into it, and that's converted to electrical signal. I mean, that still blows my mind. So I don't mind what I do, really, as long as there's one of these involved.
Anthony Davis, I hope you do it for much longer. And thanks very much for putting 5-minute news together, because it is great. And as you say, for me, I like the time-saving aspect of it. You can just tap in, and in 5 minutes, you give us the world. Whose slogan was that? Give us something and we'll give you the world? Whose slogan was it?
I think that might have been an airline.
Oh, was it? Well,
Wasn't that TWA?
I'm not sure. We'll have to track that down, because maybe you could steal it or adapt it. Give me 5 minutes and I'll give you the world. Yeah. Anthony Davis, thank you so much. Continued success. I'll let you turn your air conditioning back on now.